After all, does consuming protein before bed really accelerate muscle growth? These new studies are great. Imagine spending 8 hours of your day in a state where your body could be actively building muscle, but you simply do nothing about it. Seems wasteful, doesn't it? It's curious because most weight training practitioners are obsessed with optimizing every detail: the perfect pre-workout, the post-workout anabolic window, execution, meals strategically distributed throughout the day. But when it comes to the nighttime period, those 7 to 9 hours of sleep, the conversation simply stops. It's as if the body enters standby mode and there's nothing to do. This doesn't make sense, since we already know that sleep is the most anabolic moment of the day. That's why today you'll see everything about the science of pre-sleep protein. And I'm not talking about guesswork or broscience. We're going to examine research published between 2020 and 2025. Some of it so recent that it hasn't even been widely disseminated yet. But before we begin, please tell us through the comments your name and the city where you're watching our content from. Think about it this way. You trained hard in the afternoon, ate well at dinner, that was around 7 in the evening. You go to sleep at 11 and wake up at 7 in the morning. That's 8 hours of absolute fasting, 8 hours where your body doesn't receive a single gram of protein. During this period, your body needs amino acids to perform all the muscle reconstruction. But if there are no amino acids circulating in the blood, where is it going to get them from? Simple, from your own muscles. This is what we call muscle catabolism. A 2020 study published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine showed something revealing. The rate of muscle protein synthesis during sleep in people who did not consume protein before bed was significantly lower than in those who did. Not only that, the net protein balance, the difference between construction and destruction, became negative during the night. In other words, without protein before bed, you literally lose muscle while you sleep, even having trained during the day. This is a fundamental concept that many athletes and weight training practitioners simply ignore, focusing exclusively on daytime meals and forgetting that the body continues working intensely during the nighttime period. Scientific investigation into pre-sleep protein began in earnest in 2012 when Dutch researchers from Maastricht University, led by Dr. Luc van Loon, published a revolutionary study in the journal Medicine and Science in Sports and Exercise. The experimental design was simple but brilliant. 16 healthy young men performed a resistance training session in the evening. All received adequate post-workout nutrition containing 20 grams of protein and 60 grams of carbohydrates. But 30 minutes before bed, half received 40 grams of casein marked with isotopes for tracking, while the other half received a placebo. The results were impressive and established the foundation for all subsequent research in this area. The rate of muscle protein synthesis was 22% higher in the group that consumed protein before bed. The whole body protein balance was positive in the protein group versus negative in the placebo. The protein was effectively digested and absorbed throughout the night, maintaining elevated levels of circulating amino acids. But perhaps most important, sleep quality was not negatively affected. No gastrointestinal discomfort, no insomnia, no problems sleeping. This study opened the doors to a new area of research. Since then, more than 30 studies have been published exploring different aspects of pre-sleep protein, investigating ideal doses, most effective types of protein, specific populations, and the exact mechanisms by which protein consumed before sleep influences muscle protein synthesis during the nighttime period. The evolution of this line of research has brought us fascinating discoveries that challenged many of the initial assumptions and significantly refined our practical recommendations. The acute studies, conducted in a single night, were promising, but the question that really matters for those who train seriously remained: do these benefits translate into real gains in muscle mass and strength over time? In 2015, the same Dutch group published another crucial study, this time following 44 young men during 12 weeks of progressive resistance training. Again, all followed exactly the same training protocol, but one group received 27.5 grams of protein along with 15 grams of carbohydrates before bed every night, while the other group received only a non-caloric placebo. The results after 12 weeks were notable and confirmed that the acute effects really accumulate into long-term benefits. The cross-sectional area of type 2 muscle fibers, those with the greatest growth potential, increased 20% in the protein group versus only 8% in the placebo group. The strength gain in leg press was 251 pounds in the protein group compared to 198 pounds in the placebo. Lean body mass showed significantly greater gains with pre-sleep protein. This was no longer just theory or abstract laboratory measurements. These were real results, visible, measurable in muscle mass and strength gains that any weight training practitioner could appreciate and apply in their own training. But then, an interesting and socially relevant question arose. Would these benefits also apply to older populations? As we age, we develop what scientists call anabolic resistance. Our muscles become less responsive to growth stimuli, including both protein and exercise. A 2017 study published in the Journal of Nutrition investigated whether pre-sleep protein could help circumvent this anabolic resistance in elderly men with an average age of 74 years. The researchers tested different doses: 20 grams of casein, 20 grams with additional leucine, and 40 grams of casein alone. The finding was important and revealing. In the elderly, only the dose of 40 grams of casein was sufficient to significantly increase muscle protein synthesis during sleep. The smaller doses of 20 grams didn't work, even with the addition of leucine. This tells us something crucial about the physiology of aging. The elderly need substantially larger doses of protein to obtain the same anabolic effect that young people achieve with smaller doses. This information is particularly relevant for the prevention and treatment of sarcopenia, the progressive loss of muscle mass related to age. However, a very recent 2025 study, published in the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition, brought results that initially seem contradictory, but that actually refine our understanding. 30 elderly men over 65 years old were divided into 3 groups during 12 weeks of supervised resistance training. Training only, training plus 40 grams of protein post-workout, and training plus 40 grams of protein pre-sleep. Surprisingly, there were no significant differences between the groups in muscle mass or strength gains. All 3 groups improved similarly. Why this apparent contradiction with previous studies? The authors suggest a fundamental explanation. When habitual protein intake is already adequate, in this case, above 1 gram per kilogram of body weight per day, the specific timing may not make that much difference in untrained elderly people who are starting an exercise program. The body is so lacking in training stimulus and with so much potential for initial improvement that the simple fact of training and consuming sufficient protein already maximizes gains, regardless of the exact timing of consumption. This leads us to an important conclusion that cannot be forgotten. Total daily protein is still king. Timing is additional optimization, not a replacement for the basics. You can't compensate for a protein-poor diet simply by consuming protein before bed. But if your nutrition is already solid, adding pre-sleep protein can offer that marginal benefit that accumulated over months and years makes a real difference. Whey versus casein, the 2023 study that challenged everything. For years, decades even, casein was considered indisputably the ideal protein for pre-sleep consumption. The logic was extremely convincing and seemingly irrefutable. Casein is a slow-digesting protein, forming a coagulated gel in the acidic environment of the stomach and releasing amino acids gradually over 6 to 8 hours, theoretically perfect for the prolonged nighttime fast. Every sports nutritionist recommended casein before bed. It was practically a dogma of sports nutrition. But in 2023, researchers published in Sports Medicine a randomized controlled study that shook these long-standing convictions. 36 healthy young men performed a single session of aerobic resistance exercise in the evening, specifically 60 minutes of cycling. 30 minutes before bed, participants received one of 3 options: 45 grams of casein, 45 grams of whey, or a non-caloric placebo. The researchers measured both myofibrillar protein synthesis, which is important for adaptations to strength training and hypertrophy, and mitochondrial synthesis, which is more crucial for aerobic endurance adaptations. The results were genuinely surprising and challenged decades of established recommendations. For myofibrillar synthesis, casein produced an 18% increase compared to placebo, which was already significant. But whey produced a 35% increase compared to placebo, practically double the benefit of casein. For mitochondrial synthesis, casein increased 30% versus placebo, but whey increased an impressive 44% versus placebo. And here is perhaps the most counterintuitive discovery, completely contradicting what was expected based on known digestion characteristics. Whey maintained higher levels of plasma amino acids during most of the night, not just in the first hours after consumption. Statistically, when compared directly, there was no significant difference between whey and casein, as both were clearly superior to placebo. But numerically, in practically all measured parameters, whey showed consistent advantage. How is this possible? Considering that whey is notoriously a fast-digesting protein, how can a protein that supposedly is absorbed in 2 to 3 hours maintain elevated amino acid levels for 7 to 8 hours of sleep? The answer lies in a specific amino acid that turned out to be more important than anyone imagined. The answer to the apparent paradox lies in a specific amino acid called leucine and its role as the primary metabolic trigger for muscle protein synthesis. Leucine is one of the 3 branched-chain amino acids and stands out as the most potent anabolic signaler among all amino acids. It directly activates the mTOR pathway, which functions as the master switch or command center of cellular growth and protein synthesis. When you examine the leucine content in different proteins, the differences become enlightening. Whey contains approximately 10 to 12% leucine, while casein contains about 8%. This may seem like a small difference, but when you're consuming 45 grams of protein, the absolute quantities become significant. With whey, you're providing 9.9 to 11.9 grams of leucine. With casein, you provide 7.9 grams of leucine. This difference of almost 4.4 grams of leucine seems to make all the difference in the ability to keep the mTOR pathway activated during the night, sustaining higher rates of protein synthesis for prolonged periods. The authors of the 2023 study conclude that total leucine content may be more important than digestion speed when it comes specifically to pre-sleep protein. The larger dose of leucine provided by whey manages to initiate and sustain anabolic signaling more robustly, even though amino acids are released differently over time. This challenges decades of established recommendations that casein would necessarily be superior for this specific time of day. It doesn't mean casein is ineffective. Far from it. The data clearly shows it works, but it suggests that perhaps it's not the only option or necessarily the best option for everyone. This discovery has important practical implications. If you're using smaller doses of protein before bed, say 55 to 66 pounds, instead of 99 pounds, the advantage of whey in leucine content becomes even more critical, as you need to ensure you're reaching the minimum leucine threshold, generally considered between 5.5 to 6.6 grams, necessary to adequately stimulate muscle protein synthesis. With smaller doses of casein, you may fall below this critical threshold. This brings us to another question. Does protein consumption before bed affect sleep quality? An extremely common and legitimate concern that many people have is, but won't eating before bed disrupt my sleep? Shouldn't my body be resting instead of digesting food? This is a reasonable concern, considering that sleep quality is absolutely crucial for recovery, performance, hormonal health, and ironically, for muscle growth itself. What good would it do to stimulate protein synthesis if you compromise sleep quality and all the recovery processes that depend on it? Fortunately, the science is clear and consistent on this point. No, consuming isolated protein or with minimal processing before bed does not harm sleep quality. Multiple studies have objectively measured sleep quality parameters, including sleep latency, how long it takes to fall asleep, sleep efficiency, percentage of time in bed actually sleeping, number of nighttime awakenings, and distribution among different sleep stages. Consistently, these studies found no negative effects of pre-sleep protein on any of these parameters. In fact, some components of proteins may even potentially improve aspects of sleep quality. Tryptophan, an essential amino acid present in dairy proteins, is a direct precursor to serotonin and melatonin, the main hormones regulating the sleep-wake cycle. Protein also has a minimal effect on insulin levels when consumed alone, especially when compared to carbohydrates. This means you won't have the sharp peaks and drops in blood glucose that can disturb sleep and cause nighttime awakenings. Additionally, protein provides prolonged satiety, which can reduce nighttime awakenings caused by hunger, especially relevant for people who train intensely or are in a caloric deficit. The only genuine caveat is that some people with individual digestive sensitivity, gastroesophageal reflux, or other specific digestive conditions may experience discomfort when consuming any food very close to bedtime. In these cases, it's not necessarily the protein itself that's the problem, but the timing or amount. The solution is simply to experiment with different protein sources, adjust the amounts, or consume the protein a little earlier, like 2 hours before bed instead of 30 minutes, for example. Remember that individualization is always important in nutrition. Practical application: how to implement pre-sleep protein consumption in your routine. The first question everyone wants to know is, how much protein should I consume before bed? Based on the most recent literature and consolidating findings from multiple studies, for people 18 to 65 years old, the ideal range appears to be 55 to 88 pounds of protein. For elderly people over 65 years old, due to increased anabolic resistance, the recommended minimum rises to 88 pounds, and some individuals may benefit from even larger doses. The fundamental goal is to provide at least 5.5 to 6.6 grams of leucine, which is the threshold necessary to robustly stimulate the mTOR pathway and muscle protein synthesis. As for exact timing, the ideal is to consume protein between 30 minutes to 2 hours before bed. This interval allows initial digestion to begin without causing discomfort when you lie down and ensures that amino acid levels begin to rise during the first critical hours of sleep when anabolic processes are most active. Consuming too early, like 4 or 5 hours before bed, may not provide adequate coverage during the entire nighttime period. Consuming immediately before bed can cause discomfort or reflux in some people. Regarding the choice between whey or casein, this is now a more nuanced question than it used to be. Based on the most recent evidence, particularly the 2023 study, whey proved to be numerically superior in several parameters, mainly due to its higher leucine content. For many people, especially those using doses at the lower end of the recommended range, 55 to 66 pounds, whey may be the most effective choice. Casein is still absolutely effective and continues to be an excellent option, especially if you value the prolonged satiety sensation it provides due to slower digestion. Some brands offer blends of whey plus casein that theoretically can offer the best of both worlds, providing both the initial leucine peak and sustained amino acid release, although there is no conclusive evidence that blends are superior to whey alone. For those who prefer real food instead of powder, supplements, there are excellent whole food options. 5.3 to 7.1 ounces of Greek yogurt is fantastic because it naturally contains both whey and casein, providing about 15 to 20 grams of high-quality protein. Cottage cheese, around 5.3 ounces, is rich in casein and provides approximately 18 to 20 grams of protein. 3 to 4 cooked eggs provide complete protein of the highest quality, totaling about 18 to 24 grams. 3.5 ounces of grilled chicken breast contains about 27 grams of protein. A can of tuna provides 25 to 30 grams of protein. The digestion of these whole foods will naturally be slower due to fat and fiber content, but they are still completely effective for the purposes of providing amino acids during the nighttime period. If you enjoyed this content and also want to discover the real reason why only 1% of men over 60 years old manage to be muscular, we have a video appearing right now on the screen showing the entire explanation behind this and what you need to do to enter this 1% statistic. Don't miss it. Thank you for watching this far, and God bless you, my friend.